Hello, everyone. Christina Previtt here, and welcome back to the Barbell Mamas podcast. I am so excited because today I am joined by Jessica Lucero. So if you do not know Jessica, she is a big deal in the weightlifting space. She is a previous 58, 59 kilo lifter. Some of her medals that she gained throughout her athletic career, she gained 3 American records. She took bronze in 2019 at the Pan Am Games, and she took gold 4 times at USAW Nationals. While she is also an incredible athlete, Jess is also an unbelievable coach, and she has trained many athletes, including Maddie Sacer, up to competition, who is another international level lifter. Jess retired in 2020 after just narrowly missing the Olympic qualifier and put her energy into her coaching career. During her competitive weightlifting career, she has been open and talked about the fact that she experienced 2 pregnancy losses. And we're going to talk a little bit about those experiences today. And then she became pregnant for the 3rd time with her son in March of 2021, who was born in October of 2021. And honestly, Jess, I must tell you that I feel like he was born like yesterday because I've been following you online, obviously, for a long time. And I saw October 2021. I was like, oh my gosh, she's already over a year old.
Yeah.
I just couldn't even believe it. And so we're going to talk to Jess. She's now on coaching staff with Vero Weightlifting, and we're just so excited to have her on the podcast. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for asking me.
So why don't you tell us, I gave a very brief snapshot of your weightlifting career, but kind of when did you get started in weightlifting? How long have you been weightlifting for? What was your best total in competition? How long were you in the sport? All those things.
So my best, I started when I was 14 years old. A kind of well-known coach, his name is Danny Camargo. He's in Orlando. He actually came to my middle school and was kind of promoting weightlifting. And I remember there was a girl at my school who he had kind of like demo, but she was in my grade and she was one of his club athletes and she had made junior worlds that year. And I remember she would come to class like her Team USA gear on, and she was just so cool. Oh, but I didn't start until my freshman year of high school. And I just played a bunch of other sports before that. But yes, that's when I started. I was pretty young, 14. And then you asked about my best total. My best total in competition, I want to say was 208 or 209. I can't really remember. I had the last 4 years of my career were really interesting because I was still getting better, but my snatch would get better at competition and then my clean and jerk wouldn't be great. Or then my clean and jerk was really good and then my snatch wasn't really good. And so the total was always the same. And I remember being so irritated because I was like, if I could put everything together, I'd have such a huge total. And I remember like being so frustrated about that every meet. But yeah, anyways, I don't remember all your questions.
That's okay. I remember, so I've competed in powerlifting and weightlifting, and I always used to get more nervous for a weightlifting meet because you could have all this strength and then you're right, it just doesn't connect on meet day. Yeah. And it has nothing to do with, well, it has something to do with your technique, but has nothing to do with your strength. It's there. Yeah. It just sometimes doesn't get showcased. And then your international meets where you have all, like I was never on that level, but all the other stuff that comes into it. Yeah. So Jess was saying 209 kilos. So that is one, it's in kilograms. And then that is a combination of the snatch and the clean and jerk for individuals who aren't kind of familiar with the sport of weightlifting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we have athletes that are kind of in CrossFit, doing weightlifting, kind of recreational strength training individuals. So we just kind of want to put some of the specifics for the sport for anyone who's kind of interested. And so when you were going through your career, you retired at 30, I think, 29?
I was 31 or 2.
31. So you were in...
Or it might have been before I turned 31, but yeah, like around there.
In that. So you were in the sport for over a decade.
Yeah.
Yes. Amazing. And so when did you start thinking about becoming a mom?
I thought about... I'm like a very nurturing person. So I always knew I wanted to be a mom. Like even in high school, I know that sounds kind of psycho, but I remember being like, yeah, in high school, I'm definitely one of my goals in life is to be a mom. I just really felt called to it. But obviously when the time was right. And so I just kind of always knew, but when I was competing, you have to be kind of selfish with your body. and things. And we weren't necessarily had the two miscarriages. We weren't trying, but we're married. So we weren't like being extremely careful. It had already been after the Olympic trials in 2016. The whole plan was after I made the Olympics in 2016, I would go compete and then we would try to have a baby after Rio. And when I didn't make the team, it took me a long time to wrap my mind around that and kind of think about what we should do and what's best for the family, what's best for me, what I want to do with my career. Because at that point, I had been in the sport for 11 years, I think, in 2016. I'm so sorry about that. I don't know how to turn that sound off. Yeah, so it had been such a long time on from sport, but I had these goals that I hadn't reached yet. And I wasn't sure if I had reached my full potential or not yet. And so it was just a really hard decision that I kind of took my time with making. And I kind of started putting things in play. Like I started going back to college in 2017 after that happened. And I kind of was trying to spend a little bit more time on coaching and seminars and just kind of, not pouring all of my eggs in one basket with weightlifting because I wasn't 100% sure if I had a whole nother Olympic quad in like the 4 years up until the Olympics. Just because I was already so beat up. I had been in the sport already for a decade. And I just have dedicated and sacrificed so much for it already at that point that I just wasn't sure if I wanted to keep going. And I knew I wanted more things. Like I knew I wanted a career. I wanted a family. And so, yeah, that was a really weird time in my life because I didn't know exactly. My life just didn't go according to plan, I guess.
Yeah.
So when I got pregnant in 2018, no, 17 first, I didn't even know actually that time we were at an international competition, Pan Am Championships, and I was cutting weight. And so because I was cutting weight, your period gets kind of weird anyways. And so I was just like, hey, I don't have my period, but I'm really lean right now. I didn't even think about it. And the day before I competed or 2 days before I competed, I was like, oh, this is maybe TMI, but like excessively bleeding. Like like it was just a wild bleeding where like I just could not like leave the bathroom. And so I took a test and it was positive, but obviously I was miscarrying. It had to have been super early, weeks, because I had no idea. So I didn't have time to process that. I competed. I did okay.
I can't believe
and then afterwards I was like,
time.
Sorry?
I can't believe that you competed during that time too.
Yeah, that
must have messed with your brain.
Yeah, I mean, well, I didn't take the test until I got home, so I wasn't 100% sure. My mom actually flew out for that competition, and she's a nurse practitioner. And so I was talking to her about it, and she was like, yeah, that's what it sounds like, but we don't know for sure. And so I was like, hey, well, I'm just going to compete. Like, she's like, because it could just be a weird period. You don't know. I'm like, that's true. And we were competing. So I just put my competition hat on, put my singlet on, and got work done. Yeah. And yeah, it wasn't a great competition, but I totaled. I didn't feel good. Like my body didn't feel good. And obviously my mind was kind of distracted, but I got my job done. And then when I got home, I took it and I was like, okay, that's crazy. Like I don't know how to feel about that. It was just kind of like a lot to process. And the second time though, it was in 2018. I was like, my dad had just passed away. I was coming off of a really horrible competition at the World Championships. I left my coach that I had had for the last 6 years. Like there was just a lot of things going on. And we were helping my family with some stuff with my dad's passing and things like that. And I was training and my stomach hurt really bad. Like every time I was snatching, I was just like, what? This just feels so weird. And I told my mom about it and she was like, you should take a pregnancy test. And I was pregnant. And so I was pregnant. I think I miscarried. It was a much later. It was 13 or 14 weeks.
Oh, that's really late.
Maybe it was a little bit sooner than that, but it was later, like it was enough that I had been pregnant for a few weeks where I was like, hey, well, I need to figure out health insurance. Let's have a plan. I was pregnant for enough weeks that I was like, feeling sick and the whole thing. And that one was like really, like I was bleeding for almost 4 weeks for that one. And like, yeah, that was a whole other experience, and honestly way worse emotionally to deal with for several reasons. But yeah, that one was in 2018. And then I was like, you know what? My husband was focused a lot on his CrossFit career, and he's a games athlete. And so he wanted to move back to California with his coach. And so I just thought, you know what? Maybe this is just a sign that I needed to focus on weightlifting, give it 2 more years, just pour into my sport. And then if it's meant to be later, then it will. I can't force it. I can't. And again, we weren't trying at that point either. So, but it was heartbreaking. So you're like, okay, well, you're dealing with a loss and what could have been and all of that. So when I started competing again, I just put it out of my mind. I'm not even going to think about it. I was honestly scared to have kids at that point. Like, I was just thinking like maybe I shouldn't, because I didn't know if I could handle that again. Yeah, but then after the postponement, didn't think I had enough in me to keep going. And like now you're giving me a whole other year. I think I've been trying to be done for 4 more years. Now it's gonna be 5 years. Like, I think I just need to move on.
So when you were going through some of your pregnancy losses, did anybody make any comments to you about your exercise, or did anyone have any thoughts, or was everyone really supportive of you continuing to train during that time?
While I was pregnant, you mean? The coach that was helping me at the point in 2018, I didn't tell him for a little while, but I did tell him that snatches were hurting and I didn't feel comfortable. And I think I waited like a week, and he was suspicious. He straight up asked me if I was pregnant, and I was like, I am, and like just really uncomfortable. And so we just switched to bodybuilding for a while just because I was already nervous about it. And he wasn't like pushy. I can do to feel comfortable to be able to train to some degree. But he was like, no, you don't have to be that cautious. Your body is really strong and you need to trust your body. But obviously he understood why I would be cautious. So yeah, like we just kind of did bodybuilding and did what I was comfortable with. And then when I was miscarrying, I started training like normal again, even if I didn't really feel that good. It mentally was good for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people who use exercise, rightfully so, as a big mental health component. And so having that to lean on when you're struggling through, and not just your miscarriage, like you were grieving the loss of your dad and all those other things, I think having that as an outlet can sometimes be really healing if it doesn't have that stress associated with it. Because sometimes as a high level athlete, you can have that stress associated with it too. So can be a double-edged sword.
And I think I deal with that more now, where how hard do I push myself and how hard do I need to continue to push myself, things like that. But yeah, at that point, I was just letting myself kind of be in that moment and trusting my instincts a lot.
So then you had retired and then got pregnant with your son. I'm sorry, what's your son's name again?
His name's
Kyran. When you got pregnant with Kyran, you were already retired.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then what did your training look like when you were pregnant with him?
Well, I did a fitness program with Black Iron Nutrition. They have a pregnancy and postpartum like training plan, and I loosely followed that. And my friend Nicole was kind of helping me through that a lot too, because I had some bleeding early in my pregnancy until I think it started around 8 weeks, and then I had it through 14 weeks. I forget what they call it, but there was basically like a blood clot in there, and it had nothing to do with the baby. The baby was fully safe, and my doctor like kind enough to let me come in every week for an ultrasound, like give me that confidence. Look, the blood clot's getting smaller. It's just coming out, and the baby's heartbeat is strong. Like everything is going well. And so but she encouraged me not to, like, she was like, you can work out, but I would prefer you not like lift right now, like just for peace of mind, like maybe like, walking or really low impact exercise. And Nicole and I talked about that, and I like that was actually a big struggle because I really wanted to have a very fit pregnancy, mostly for my son, but also for me mentally and physically. Like I just wanted to feel like I'm very type A, so I just wanted to feel like I had control of something, and that was one thing that I felt like I could do. and I wasn't able to do it. And so that was really hard. And so I was coaching at that time, and Maddie Sasser was competing at Pan Am Championships in Dominican Republic. So I was traveling pregnant, and nobody knew about it. Like, she didn't know. I didn't tell anyone except for the national team coaches, because I wasn't allowed to load the bars, or like she didn't want me to load the bars. And so it was like, it was just funny, because I was like, okay, I wasn't going to tell them, but I told them because of that. And then also they wanted me to, like, there was this thing that they had that they put around your body, and it was like tight, and it was like for massage, and they were trying to get me to try it. And I was like, I'm not putting that up over my stomach. Like, and this is why, but it's a secret. And so that was kind of funny, but in like a fun time. But yeah, I was like very, very like babying myself at that point. And I eventually ended up getting like being able to do more, but it was like bodybuilding kind of metcons, but like really low key kind of metcons. And I wanted me to run, but I like light jogs, but I had a lot of pressure, because I don't know if it was just like my body shape or what, but I had like a lot of back pain the bigger my belly got. And I'm just like small, and I have like a big lumbar curve. And so I don't know if I just was having trouble with like the pelvic pressure and then like my lower back. So we just didn't run. But yeah, we just kind of modified a lot of stuff, and I just did what I could to feel like I was working every day, you know?
Yeah. And did you ever have that anxiety go away? Like, I know that, you know, a lot of clients of mine and people who kind of speak openly about pregnancy loss, sometimes they'll have like this time when they had experienced a loss. They describe like holding their breath until they get to that moment, or, you know, being very cautious with exercise until they got past that moment. Did you have any of that, or
I
was it
had
kind of
like
great?
moments, like timelines in my mind, like I'll feel better after this. I'll feel better after like the 20-week appointment. I'll feel better after the second trimester. And I never felt better. At every stage, I was like thinking in my mind, then I would feel better after that point, but I never did. And even postpartum, I had like pretty high anxiety. Even then, like I was very scared of everything. Everything. It was unhealthy and like crazy to even think about. But yeah, I don't know if it's because of the loss or just my personality type, but
Yeah.
yeah, it never went away. I think it's starting to go away now that he's like a year and a half. I don't, even when he got sick, like everybody else isn't privy, I guess, but like we scheduled this for a different day, but he got sick and he got sent home from daycare, and so we had to cancel. But even that day, like when they texted me that he had a fever, I was like shaking and like freaking out. But then once I got him home and I was like, actually, my had eyes on him, I was like calming down a lot. I'm like, okay, that was a little bit of an overreaction.
I think some of that too is a lot of first time mom fears. Were you ever diagnosed with like postpartum anxiety, like kind of linked to it?
No, but I'm like not like 100% sure. I would say 99.9 or 100% sure I had it. For sure.
We always had a postnatal exercise program at my clinic when we lived up in Canada. And a lot of the moms who had babies, especially first babies around COVID, I think just anxiety was higher in general, because it's hard enough to be a first time mom, but then you're also thinking like, who should be around the baby? Like, how do I protect the baby? Like what are the unknowns that I don't know about every wave and all of these things, and what's okay and what isn't, and what's too cautious versus what are they going to need as they grow up. I think there's like a whole other layer of stress when transitioning into motherhood is already so stressful. And your husband, he's in the military now. He was away for big chunks of time too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when he was here, like he was in a training program, so he wasn't very present or able to be very present. And so I did most of it. I would say mostly all of it by myself, but all the wake ups at night, like every day, I was like, yeah, I was stay at home mom. So yeah, that's all I did. Like, I was just point man.
Yeah, and it's a lot. And we know too that the sleep deprivation and not having the support just can be a big trigger for postpartum mental health stuff, whether it's anxiety, depression, all of those things. And so I think, yeah, and it's funny you say that. Now I think I'm doing better. I feel like there's a lot of people who go through these experiences and then they look back and they're like, Oh, like I was like, ooh, like I didn't realize it. We have this like newborn fog, but like that was bordering on like that probably wasn't. I should have sought a little bit more help with that. And
Yeah.
I think your experience is very, very common, and that's why talking about these things are so great.
Yeah.
So tell us about your birth and your postpartum journey.
I've heard that term like traumatic birth a lot, and I don't really know. I guess it's like anyone's interpretation of what a traumatic birth is. I'm not really sure. It felt pretty traumatic to me because Christian's program was starting like on a Monday, and he had 2 weeks leave for Kyran to be born, and he was 2 weeks late. So we were coming up on the end of his leave, and Kyran still hadn't come. And my doctors out in California, I don't know if it's normal everywhere, but they like after 41 weeks, they start pushing for an induction, especially because I was an older mom, and they were saying like it might be time to like start scheduling that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just put one on the schedule before his leave was over and hoped that he would come sooner than that. And like I lost my mucus plug 4 days before that 3 days before the actual induction. So I was like thinking for sure he would come on his own, but he didn't. So they called us on that day and they were like, okay, let's do your induction. So yeah, we just like casually drove there, and I really wanted to do a natural birth. Like I had done a lot of studying, I did a lot of breathing and like preparation for that mentally and physically. But I also was like realistic in knowing that like if this induction situation ends up being like kind of gnarly, like if we have to do every single thing, like the whole balloon, like all of it, then I'd be more open to doing the epidural, but it would take that. And when we got to the hospital and they started, all the medicine and all of that, like, he just still wasn't progressing, and it had been a long time, which is normal, I think. The more I read about it, the more normal it seems. Like it's not like a quick induction that you think like, oh, they're just gonna tell him to come out and then he comes out. It was like we were in there for like 2 days before I was able to start pushing, and we had to do the whole balloon thing. We had to do it all. So we did the epidural. But sidebar, this is really funny, but the guy who came in, the anesthesiologist who did my epidural, he came in and he was like, "Were you an athlete?" And I was like, yeah, why?" And he was like, "You have bone spurs in your back, right?" And I was like, that doesn't surprise me.
I've loaded it with a lot of weight.
Yeah, he's like, "You've got bone spurs and probably because like he could feel it because he was like having trouble getting the epidural in." And I was like, "Oh wow, well that makes sense because my back hurts a lot." Anyway, funny sidebar, but yeah. So anyways, we end up pushing. We were like pushing for 6 or 7 hours, and then they started asking me how I felt about a C-section.
6 or 7 hours. That is an incredibly long time.
Yes, it was very hard. And Christian didn't want to do one, but I was like, I hadn't slept because the 2 days, like I'm a really light sleeper anyways, and being in the hospital, it was like all the beeping and they'd come in and check on you. And so I just hadn't slept in like over 2 days. And so I was like, I don't have anything left. Like, I don't think I can keep pushing. I don't know what to do. And I was starting to get panicky, and so I like just asked him if we could because they're suggesting it. It's making me more comfortable, and I don't know what else. Like I just don't know what else to do. And he like, not progressing. Like it was almost 2 hours where he was in the same exact spot. He didn't progress any further. And they were saying like the shape of my pelvis, like his head wasn't too big or anything. It was just like the shape of my pelvis. And so I was like, okay, well, I can't change my pelvis. I don't know. I didn't know
Yeah.
enough, I don't think. I wish I would have had a doula or somebody who knew more because I just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so we did the C-section, and that was so traumatizing, like the scariest thing I've ever done in my life for sure.
Yeah.
And then we went home the next day. So that was
Wow, that's such a long, like that's a long journey. So for people who don't know about the induction process, they can do it with either like a prostaglandin that they'll insert to try and ripen the cervix, or they'll put a Foley like balloon into the cervix. And that insertion for people who have never had children before is quite painful and can be quite invasive. And then from then they'll augment with a drug called Pitocin to try and get the cervix to dilate before labor has started on its own. And then from the other thing you said was a doula. So a doula is a birth support person. So they have training in kind of the physiology of birth, and they come alongside as your advocate. So they can come into the hospital with you and they kind of know what your plans are. And so if you are in the middle of pushing or you're exhausted and doctors are trying to tell you things and you're not really at a headspace where you can listen to those options, they are able to advocate, and they know what you want and can help with those transitions and those decisions. And so we're super big fans of doulas too, because it can be so cool, especially if you've had a previous experience which was very traumatizing to you. And so they can be a really wonderful asset.
Yeah.
So when you went home, did Christian have to leave right away?
Yeah, he started work on Monday, so he was home for Wednesday. So he came Earthside on Wednesday, and then we came home on Thursday, and then wait, maybe we came home on Friday actually. Other day because I just did not feel good, and I still wasn't walking or anything yet.
Yep.
So I think we came home Friday. So we had 2 days with him home, and then he left. And he had to live on base for that period of time for that piece of his training. And so yeah, he just didn't live at home with us for 4 weeks.
My gosh. Jess, that's so hard.
Yeah.
And so how are you recovering, taking on all baby duties without anyone around? Did you have family around at all?
Yeah, I was living with his mom at the time, but she has like a very busy job. So she was usually home after she would go to work and then come home. And by the time she was home for the night, like Kyran was asleep. So she helped a little bit on the weekends and like when she could. And she did take she took a week or 2 weeks off in the very first 2 weeks. So I did get some naps in there, which was super helpful. But when she went back, yeah, it was just.
Well, and like the early recovery phase, just in terms of recovering from a major abdominal surgery too.
Oh yeah, and that was I had a friend who had from back home who had a C-section, I think like 2 months after me, and like she was like fine, like she like it didn't affect me at all. I was like I cannot recover from this. Like it was really, I didn't realize like how crazy and hard that would have been for me. But yeah, like, it was really challenging for me to recover.
And you know what? Everybody has completely different experiences. Some people, like you say, they're like, oh, this was easier for me. It was easier than I thought it would be. And then other people they'll have infections or complications, or just their body just doesn't respond as well to that recovery process. And so, there's both camps, and it's just kind of a range of everyone's experiences.
Yeah, it was a lot harder than I expected. Like Christian's aunt had all C-sections, and yeah, I don't know. I just didn't ask enough questions. I didn't as educated on C-sections going in because I was like, oh, I'm not going to need to do that. I don't know why. I'm a person who likes to be prepared, and I did a lot of research on like the birth process, but I didn't even think of this as an option. So I didn't even let myself read about it.
Yeah. When we do birth prep sessions in our pelvic PT, for anyone, whether they want to do a vaginal delivery or a C-section, we always talk about C-section for that exact, like, I know that this is not what you want, but if this was to happen, here's what your expectations are. And we do that in our birth preparation meetings or meet moms to be, because you're right. We can have like a plan and then birth goes another way, or baby decides that that's not the plan that they want, and they kind of run the show at that point and something else.
Yeah, that's really smart.
So what happened with your postpartum journey back into movement?
So I took the full 6 weeks just because I bled for a really long time, which like they told me was fine. Like they weren't concerned about it, but yeah, I was still bleeding up through that 6-week appointment. So they said, yeah, let's just keep it the traditional, like some women can start like after 2 or 3 weeks. I was not one of them. I waited the full time, and I just waited till I was cleared. I think part of that was like peace of mind too, because
Yeah.
just because the whole experience was so bad. And like some babies are good sleepers and Kyran wasn't. And so I had the whole sleep deprivation thing going on, like 30 minutes at a time every night. Like, yeah, it was,
And you get the anxiety, like I need to fall asleep right now because he's going to be up in 30 minutes. Like
yeah.
that
And
would be
then
what
you
would
don't
work for
sleep
me.
because you're anxious. And then, yeah.
Yes.
Oh my
Oh,
God. Yeah, yeah, that was really hard. But sorry, I lost train of thought from, oh,
postpartum during back to movement. Yeah.
yeah. So after 6 weeks, I did the black postpartum program too. I think I did it for almost 12 weeks, maybe even longer. Yeah, and it was really gentle. Like it was a lot of body weight stuff, a lot of walking, a lot of, you know, if I started loading it, it was a very like gentle load, like dumbbells only, and
Mhm.
a lot of core recovery kind of stuff, a lot of 360 breathing on a Bosu ball, like all those things, or I mean a yoga ball. So yeah, I mostly did that. I do would have gone to a pelvic floor therapist. That's something like in the future, if I have more kids, that's something I like want to do prior and after, based on that experience, because I just felt like, I don't know, I do well with having a coach. I think it would be easier.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. And well, I'm totally biased because I'm in that profession and I am a pelvic health PT,
Yeah.
but we we focus on because we know that your birth provider is focusing on baby. So we're
Yeah.
making sure that your body is feeling good, that you know what your guideposts are for exercise. When we try and get moms, if they can, via telehealth or in person, to be there at 2 weeks postpartum because we want to know how your recovery is going. It's like, how are you doing? No, how are you really doing type of questions. And, we can inspect stitches and just give you some peace of mind a lot of the time, saying, like, this is exactly where we would expect you to be at 2 weeks. Because sometimes you don't see your provider for 6 weeks. And there's a lot that can happen from a mental health side. Like, stuff can switch very fast in those
Yes.
first 6 weeks, too. Like, you need that, I feel. And I just wish
Yeah.
it was more like standard practice.
Yeah. And somebody suggested, I think it might have even been Nicole, like somebody suggested it to me, but it's also like, it's not covered by our insurance. And so it's like one of those things where you're like, it's expensive. Do I need to like focus on myself? I don't know. It's just like one of those weird decisions where you pause long. I don't know if I really need it or not, because it's not super easy to do. And here where I lived, the only pelvis was like kind of far, and
Mhm.
I had a lot of anxiety about driving with Kyran in the car, which is a whole other thing. But like at the time, I was just nervous about driving. Kind of, it's like 30 to 40 minutes away.
Yeah, it's far.
Yeah, it was far, and so I was just like, okay, well, I have to pay for it. It's expensive. I don't even know if it's going to help. I'm so tired. Do I really want to do this? Do I need to be working out right now? Like you just talk yourself out of it,
Yeah.
and the drive's already going to be stressful because he's going to cry the whole time, and then
Yeah. That whole thing for sure.
but now I know it's totally worth it, and like without question for sure next time. And I tell all of my friends pregnant, like, go see one today.
Yeah. Yeah. So how is your recovery from your C-section scar perspective with movement? Like, did you ever have anything that just didn't feel good as you were coming back into different type of movement stuff? Did you ever come back to barbell training or did you stick in bodybuilding? Like, what kind
Yeah.
did that look like for you?
So I also did a lot of research on like scar mobilization and stuff like that. I got super like crazy, not crazy, type A. So I did a lot of that stuff on my own, and yeah, I would start doing a little bit of snatching. If I bar for whatever reason did touch that area, it was more sensitive, but it wasn't, and it did feel like a big stretch. Like, it doesn't happen as much anymore, but when I first started getting into like more intenseness, like in the last, I would say 6 months, 4 to 6 months, I was getting a like stretching in my abs, like everything I did overhead, I should say. I felt a lot of stretching in my one of my good friends is a birth fit coach, and so I was talking to her about that, and she was like giving me some suggestions on just loosening up my hips and things like that. And since then, it's been fine. Yeah, I don't have any
Nice.
limitations on what I can do. And honestly, I feel like my flexibility and my body feels better now than it might have when I was competing in some ways.
Nice.
Yeah.
In that postpartum period, you take time to go back to the fundamentals and the basics, and you give yourself that permission, which I
Yeah.
think can just make your body feel good.
Yeah. And
And
that,
yes, well, that does place either.
mm-mm.
It's interesting that you say about the stretch, because one of the things that I've really been kind of thinking about a lot more about how to educate new moms, especially moms who've had a C-section, is that, we focus on the horizontal incision that you can see, but there's also a vertical incision that goes up that six-pack line. And so they cut across, but then they cut up on the other layers internally.
Oh
And
my
so we
gosh.
focus so much on the mobilization horizontally, but we don't focus on the fact that there's scar tissue vertically as well. And so when we don't mobilize that vertical tissue, then it can create the stiffness overhead.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
how do we tell moms, right, that they need to be focusing, yes, absolutely on that scar on the skin, but we also want to start doing that down that six-pack line.
Who knew? I literally had no idea. That's so funny. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. Also, this is super weird. I don't even know. I like that much and it doesn't happen as much anymore. But like for the first maybe 6 months of Kyran's life, I had like a section of my stomach above my incision line that like was always cold. And it was just like a sliver. And I was like, did they move my organs? And it's just like not getting blood flow. Like it would freak me out if I like thought about it too much. And I don't notice it much anymore, but it was like almost numb there all the time.
Yeah, so that is usually because when they cut through those layers, they can nick on some like the peripheral branches of your nerves. And those like nervy branches can be hot, cold, and sensation. So if
Oh
it
my
just takes
God.
generate. So it will take, they'll say 6 or 8 months that you'll probably have some of those changes of sensation around your C-section scar
No one
because
told me
of
that.
just the incision.
Literally, no
Oh
one told me that.
no. Well, I'm
I was
telling
just
you
like,
now.
I was just like at night, I would feel it and notice it and be like, don't think about it. Just don't think about it. It's fine. You're healthy. It's okay.
I should have like reached out to you on Instagram being like, ask
Oh,
me your questions.
oh my gosh, it's totally fine.
So tell us about your new exciting job. So we're kind of switching gears away from mom mode and mom boss mode into your new job at Vero.
Yeah, so I actually have 2 new jobs. I work at Vero, but I also started, so I'm in my master's program for social work, and so I actually just I got a job working in social work right now. But then yeah, I'm still coaching with Vero. I'm actually leaving a week and a half to go down to Florida for the state championships, which is going to be super
Nice.
fun. Yeah, we have like over 50 athletes competing. Yeah,
Wow, that's a huge club.
our club is so big and they're all so good. Like we've got in the senior level, the junior level, and the youth level. And then obviously like beginners and like brand new like 8-year-olds. Like it's unreal.
I love that. That
Yeah.
is so cool that you get to teach to so many different levels. Like that's
Yes.
and kind of be a chameleon because what they need at different levels is so different.
Yeah, it's
That's really
really
cool.
fun. Honestly, it's like the best case scenario because like from the elite mindset, like I still think that way. So I can still relate to them and I can meet them at like kind of a peer level and for some of them because a lot of them have been lifting long enough to have known who I am, but like then there's the younger kids who have no idea who I am, which is totally fine. But I can just coach them as a coach. And so it's kind of cool. It's really cool. Yeah,
That's
I love it.
amazing.
It's the
Yeah.
best.
So then is it kind of go full on into social work?
Yeah, when I graduate, I'll probably lifting like that'll always be something that I do. But yeah, the social work is I mean the goal would be like from a therapy perspective, like LC. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. My final question for you. What was one of the most surprising things to you about being pregnant or becoming a mom? What's something that you wish that somebody would have told you before?
You don't know until you know. Like
Yeah.
you can do all the research in the world. You can feel as prepared. You can talk to as many moms as you want. You don't know how you're going to feel as a mom through each phase of pregnancy, postpartum, motherhood, and in general, like each developmental stage that they go through. Like you just don't know. Like I thought for sure I was going to be such a newborn mom. Like I was going to like that's going to be my favorite time period, and it was awful. I'm such a like I much prefer like the toddler mom phase like right that we're in now. Even
Yep.
though it's very frustrating in other ways, the newborn phase was just so hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was so hard for me to just be like, I mean, of course I loved him and I was like just staring at him all day. And I had all of those moments, definitely. But yeah, I just really like to sleep. And I didn't realize how much I like to sleep until that happened.
And you don't realize how much you can actually kind of still function on so little sleep, but that you don't want to do that again. There's like a reel going around Instagram right now that says like, who told me like the newborn phase was the hardest, and they're like, that is incorrect. Like, or like the other round, like the
Yes.
toddler phase was the hardest. That like, everyone's got their opinions about which
Yes.
phase.
It's like
And
dependent. I don't
totally.
know.
Yeah.
And
I have
also, like if my partner, like if I had like support at night or like even during the day, I feel like I would have liked it even more. Like I just able matters. And like I
totally.
never just advocated more for like things that I was needing, and I think my experience would have been different. But that's, you don't know until you know. And I was like, I'm totally the type to be like, I should be able to handle this. So I'm just gonna suck it up. So that's my own my own thing.
That's so many moms too that are like, I should be like, look at all these people on Instagram, like they're got it all figured out. Like I should be able to figure it out too. And the answer is that they're just showing the little part of their house that's clean. And if they really panned out, they would see that everybody's got toys all over their floor. Like that's just momhood.
Or they just have a really good way of hiding it because like I'm exposing myself here, but I just set up a like TV stand, and it has just like a bunch of cabinets, and like I'm like things to be organized. I like things to be clean, but I have a toddler, so if you open them, there's just like toys everywhere.
Oh yeah,
Shove them in there, and they'll fit.
Yeah, and you shove it really quickly. It's booby trapped every single time.
Yep.
100%.
And then when he opens them, they just all fall. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes we'll just close our kids' door, being like, we're just not even going to look in there. That just does not exist to us if we keep the kitchen and the living. Yeah, it's just, yeah. And you don't know till you don't know about like if you have more kids too. Like I didn't know that for me, the jump from 1 to 2 is going to be one of my harder jumps. Like, really? Like it's just no until you're in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to experience it and go with the punches.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica, for taking the time to talk to us. This was so wonderful. If you follow you online or follow with your journey or get coaching from you, where would you direct them to?
Yeah, just my Instagram is the easiest way. I mean, you could reach out to Vero Beach Weightlifting's Instagram also, which I think is just at Vero Beach Weightlifting, but it's really easy. I'm pretty is at Jessica Lucero 9. And yeah, and like we do have openings for athletes right now. So if people wanted to join, they can. We've got like 2 or 3 spots open, I think, left. So
amazing. Thank you so much. And good luck with state championships. That's going to be so fun. And I can't wait to see all about online.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll post as much as I can. It'll be really fun. I'm excited.
Thanks.